Marcus Chen wiped grease from his hands with an old rag as he stared at the boarding pass in disbelief. Seat 2A. First class. On the Imperial Galactic Cruiser Stellaris, he'd been expecting a cramped cargo transport back to Earth after finishing his repair contract on Kepler Station. But somehow, the automated booking system had upgraded him. Must be a computer error, he muttered, shouldering his tool bag. The thing was ancient, leather-worn smooth from decades of use, inherited from his grandfather, who'd been a mechanic on the first Mars colonies. Marcus had no intention of questioning his luck, though. After 3 months fixing life support systems in the outer rim, breathing recycled air that always tasted faintly of metal and desperation, he was ready for some luxury. The Stellaris was magnificent. 3 kilometers of gleaming hull, equipped with the latest tachyon drives that could cross half the galaxy in a standard week. It was the flagship of the Galactic Empire's civilian fleet, and Marcus felt distinctly out of place as he walked through corridors lined with exotic woods from a dozen different worlds. Other passengers wore clothes that probably cost more than his annual salary. He found his seat and nearly laughed. The pod was larger than his entire quarters, back on Kepler Station, soft leather that adapted to his body, a personal food fabricator, and a viewport that showed the swirling blue of hyperspace. The seat next to him was empty. Though, according to the manifest display, someone was assigned there. "Excuse me, sir." A flight attendant appeared, her uniform crisp and her smile professional but strained. "I'm afraid there's been a mix-up with the seating arrangements. Would you mind moving to coach? We can offer you a meal voucher for the inconvenience." Marcus glanced at his boarding pass again. "This is my assigned seat. Paid for and confirmed." The attendant's smile flickered. "I understand, sir. But there's been a priority passenger change. If you could just... Is there a problem here?" The voice was crisp, authoritative, and came from behind Marcus. He turned to see a woman in a simple dark traveling cloak, hood up, carrying a small bag. Despite the plain clothes, something about her posture screamed nobility. The flight attendant immediately straightened. "Your Highness, I was just explaining to this gentleman that there's been a seating error." Marcus blinked. "Highness?" He was sitting next to royalty? That explained the urgency to move him. He started to stand. But the woman raised a hand. "What error?" "This man has a valid boarding pass for this seat." "I see no problem." She settled into the seat next to Marcus with fluid grace. "Unless you're suggesting the Imperial booking system is incompetent?" The flight attendant paled. "Of course not, Your Highness. I'll inform the captain you're both settled." As the attendant hurried away, Marcus stared at his seatmate. She'd pushed back her hood, revealing sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a practical style, and eyes that missed nothing. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe late 20s, with the kind of bearing that came from never having to question whether people would obey her. "Thank you," Marcus said. "You didn't have to do that." She shrugged. "The seat is yours. Besides, I prefer sitting next to someone who actually works for a living rather than another pampered noble who's never held a tool in their life." She noticed his tool bag. "Engineer?" "Mechanic, repair specialist. I fix things when they break down." Marcus wasn't sure why he was being so talkative. Maybe it was the stress of nearly being ejected from his seat. Useful skill. "I'm Lyra." She didn't offer a last name, though given the Your Highness treatment, Marcus could guess. "Marcus Chen, and I'm guessing you're more than just Lyra." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Technically, I'm Princess Lyra Astrion, third daughter of Emperor Hadrian Astrion, heir to the galactic throne, Duchess of the Andromeda Sector, and about 12 other titles I've never bothered to memorize." She said it like she was reciting a grocery list. "But right now, I'm just someone who's tired of people treating her like fragile decoration." Marcus nearly choked on the water he'd just sipped. Third in line to rule the galaxy. Great. No pressure in casual conversation. "Actually, I'm fourth now. My older brother just had a son." Lyra seemed amused by Marcus's discomfort. "And please, don't start treating me differently. It's refreshing to meet someone who wasn't automatically briefed on how to interact with me. The ship's captain's voice echoed through the cabin, announcing their departure from Kepler Station. Through the viewport, Marcus watched the station shrink to a point of light as they entered hyperspace proper. He'd been living there for months, but from this distance, it looked so small and insignificant. "What kind of things do you repair?" Lyra asked, settling back in her seat. She seemed genuinely curious. "Whatever breaks. Life support, gravity generators, atmospheric processors, fusion reactors. If it keeps people alive in space, I've probably fixed it." Marcus found himself relaxing despite who he was talking to. Spent the last 3 months on Kepler Station replacing corroded plasma conduits. Not glamorous work, but someone has to do it. "The outer rim stations are crucial," Lyra said seriously. "They're our early warning system against threats from dark space, and they process resources the core worlds depend on. Without mechanics like you keeping them running, the Empire would collapse in a year." Marcus stared at her. "You actually know that? I've been touring the outer territories for the past year, visiting stations and colonies most nobility never see. My father's idea. He says I need to understand the Empire from the ground up if I'm ever going to help rule it." Lyra's expression darkened slightly. "Most of the nobles think it's beneath them to care about places like Kepler Station. They see them as necessary inconveniences. And you disagree? I think they're the backbone of everything we've built. The core worlds are just where the paperwork gets shuffled." She turned to face him fully. "Tell me about the station. What's it really like living there?" For the next hour, Marcus found himself describing life on the rim in detail he'd never shared with anyone. The constant low-level stress of maintaining aging systems with limited resources, the camaraderie among the small crew who kept the station running, the way everyone knew their life depended on everyone else doing their job right. The pride in keeping a vital outpost operational despite the odds. Lyra listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed she understood the technical challenges and the human cost of frontier life. She wasn't just being polite, she genuinely wanted to know. "The atmospheric recycler in Section C has been making a grinding noise for 2 years, Marcus found himself saying. "We keep patching it, but it really needs a complete overhaul. The station commander keeps requesting replacement parts, but they're low priority for the supply chain. What would happen if it failed completely? We'd have maybe 6 hours to evacuate before the air became unbreathable. But there's only one transport scheduled per month, and it can't carry the whole crew." Marcus shrugged. "So, we keep patching it, and hope it holds together." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "That's unacceptable. It's reality. The Empire has a lot of stations to support, and we're not exactly a high-profile posting. No, it's unacceptable that people are risking their lives because bureaucrats in the core worlds can't be bothered to prioritize essential repairs." There was steel in her voice. "What else needs fixing?" Marcus hesitated. He'd never had anyone in authority actually ask that question and seem to care about the answer. "You really want to know?" "I really want to know." So he told her. The backup power generator that only worked half the time, the communication array that had dead zones where messages couldn't get through, the medical bay that was missing half its equipment because the previous shipment had been rerouted to a core world hospital, the quarters where the heating hadn't worked in a year, forcing crew to sleep in maintenance areas near the engine room. With each item, Lyra's expression grew more serious. She took notes on a small tablet, asking for specific part numbers and technical specifications. This wasn't casual conversation anymore. It was an official debriefing. "How do you stay motivated?" she asked finally. "Knowing that your hard work is barely noticed, that you're always fighting to maintain the minimum standard to keep people alive?" Marcus thought about it. "Because it matters. When I fix something, people's lives get better. Maybe just a little, maybe just for a while. But it's real, and because..." He paused, unsure how to explain it to someone who'd grown up in palaces. Because someone has to. If I don't fix the recycler, who will? If I don't patch the power generator, what happens to the crew? We're it. We're the people who keep the lights on and the air flowing and the gravity working so that civilization can exist out here. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. Lyra was quiet for several minutes, staring out the viewport at the swirling colors of hyperspace. When she spoke, her voice was soft. My tutors taught me about duty and responsibility to the Empire, but they always framed it in terms of policy and politics and grand strategy. They never explained that duty sometimes means crawling through maintenance shafts at 3 a.m. to fix a plasma conduit that no one will ever thank you for repairing. Different kinds of duty, Marcus said. Yours is probably more important. Is it? Lyra turned back to him. You've kept hundreds of people alive over the years. You've maintained infrastructure that protects the Empire's borders. You've solved problems with your own hands. What have I done? Attended ceremonies and given speeches, and studied theoretical governance. Marcus sensed this was dangerous territory. You're here now, learning about the real Empire. That has to count for something. My father sent me to the Outer Rim to teach me humility, to show me how the other half lives so I'd be a better ruler. Lyra's laugh was bitter. But what I've learned is that the other half are the ones actually doing the work, while people like me take credit for their success. That's not true. Leadership matters. Having someone who understands the big picture, who can make decisions that help everyone, that's important too. But does it have to be me? The question seemed to surprise her as much as it did Marcus. I'm fourth in line for the throne. My older siblings are perfectly capable. Maybe I could do more good as an engineer than as a princess. Marcus stared at her. You're serious. I don't know. Maybe. Lyra rubbed her forehead. All I know is that after a year of seeing what life is really like in the outer territories, sitting in council meetings discussing trade policy feels like playing games while people are dying from preventable problems. The ship's tone chimed, announcing that dinner service was beginning. Around them, other passengers were activating their food fabricators or calling for personal service. The artificial day cycle was shifting toward evening, and the corridor lighting had dimmed to match. Would you like to continue this conversation over dinner? Lyra asked. I promise I won't interrogate you about infrastructure problems for the entire meal. Ever? Lyra asked in 10. Ever. 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 Marcus grinned. I'd like that. Though I have to warn you, I'm not used to royal dining etiquette. Perfect. I'm tired of people who are. As they activated their food fabricators and settled in for the evening, Marcus reflected on the strange turn his day had taken. This morning he'd been a working-class mechanic heading home after a routine contract. Now he was having dinner with a princess who seemed more interested in plasma conduits than court protocol. Outside the viewport, hyperspace continued its endless dance of light and color, carrying them toward the core worlds where their paths would diverge. Marcus back to his small apartment on Earth, Lyra to whatever duties awaited a princess of the realm. But for now, in this moment between destinations, they were just two people sharing a meal and honest conversation about duty, purpose, and what it really meant to serve something larger than yourself. Neither of them suspected that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. 3 days into their journey, the ship's emergency klaxons shattered the peaceful hum of hyperspace travel. Marcus jolted awake in his pod, instantly alert. 30 years of maintaining life-critical systems had trained his body to respond to that particular sound with immediate adrenaline. Red emergency lighting bathed the passenger cabin as the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a critical malfunction in our primary hyperspace drive. We will be dropping out of hyperspace momentarily and making emergency repairs. Please remain in your seats. The Stellaris shuddered as it transitioned from the ethereal blue of hyperspace back to the star-filled black of normal space. Through his viewport, Marcus could see they'd dropped near a red dwarf system, its angry crimson light casting everything in an ominous glow. Lyra appeared at his side, having moved from her seat as soon as the alarm started. She was fully dressed despite the early hour, and Marcus realized she'd probably been awake already. This doesn't sound routine, she said. Marcus was already reaching for his tool bag. Hyperspace drive failures never are. If they can't fix it quickly, we'll be stranded here for weeks waiting for rescue. The captain's voice returned, more strained this time. We have suffered a cascade failure in the hyperspace field generator. Our engineering team is attempting repairs, but we will require several days to restore functionality. We apologize for the inconvenience. Several days. Marcus knew enough about Starship systems to understand what that probably meant. They're being optimistic. A cascade failure usually means multiple components failed simultaneously. Could take weeks to repair, assuming they have the right parts. And if they don't have the right parts, then we wait for a rescue ship to find us, assuming they can locate us in this system. A new voice joined the conversation. I'm afraid the situation is worse than that. They turned to see a tall man in an engineering uniform approaching. His badge identified him as Chief Engineer Valdez. Your Highness, he said, nodding to Lyra before addressing Marcus. You're the mechanic from Kepler Station, right? I heard about your conversation with the princess. I am. What's the real situation, Chief? Valdez glanced around, then lowered his voice. The cascade failure damaged our emergency beacon. We can't send a distress signal. And the field generator isn't just broken, it's showing signs of sabotage. Lyra went very still. Sabotage? Someone introduced a virus into the drive control system. It lay dormant until we were deep in hyperspace, then triggered a feedback loop that burned out half the primary systems. Valdez rubbed his forehead tiredly. We're stranded in an uninhabited system with no way to call for help and evidence someone wanted us here. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. How many people know about the sabotage? Just the senior engineering staff and the captain. And now you two. We're trying to keep it quiet to avoid panic. But, Valdez shook his head, the truth is, we don't have enough spare parts to fix this. The Stellaris is a luxury liner, not a deep space exploration vessel. We carry enough spares for routine maintenance, not rebuilding entire systems from scratch. What do you need? Marcus asked. Valdez pulled out a tablet and showed him a list. Marcus whistled low. Quantum field regulators, plasma conduits, control matrices. This is basically a complete drive rebuild. Exactly. Even if we had all these parts, it would take our team weeks to install them properly. And we definitely don't have quantum field regulators rated for a ship this size. Lyra had been silent, but now she spoke. Chief Valdez, how long can the ship's life support systems operate without the main drive? The fusion reactors will keep running for months. That's not the problem. The problem is that we're in hostile territory. What do you mean? Marcus asked. This system is on the edge of Keth space. The Keth Collective has been testing our borders for months, probing for weaknesses, if they detect a disabled Imperial ship. Valdez didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus had heard about the Keth, an aggressive alien species that had been expanding aggressively toward Imperial space for the past decade. First contact had gone badly, and tensions had been escalating ever since. The Empire's navy was stretched thin trying to patrol the vast border. So, we're potentially stranded in enemy territory with evidence someone sabotaged our ship, Lyra summarized. Who else was supposed to be on this passenger manifest? Valdez consulted his tablet. 3 Imperial senators, 2 corporate executives from Titan Industries, the Andalusian ambassador, and about 40 other high-profile passengers. Plus you, of course, Your Highness. Someone wanted to eliminate multiple Imperial leaders simultaneously, Lyra said grimly. The question is who? And whether they're still on the ship. Marcus studied the parts list again. Chief, what if I told you I could fabricate some of these components? Both Valdez and Lyra stared at him. Fabricate how? Valdez asked. The ship's machine shop has industrial fabricators, right? And we're in a system with asteroids that should contain most of the raw materials we need. I've had to jury-rig hyperspace components before, usually for ships much older than this one. You can't seriously suggest building quantum field regulators from scratch, Valdez protested. The tolerances are measured in angstroms. One small error, and the field could collapse catastrophically. Ow. The regulators? No. But I can build temporary replacements for most of these other components. They won't be as elegant as factory-built parts, but they should hold together long enough to get us back to Imperial space. Lyra leaned forward. What would you need? Marcus considered the question. access to the machine shop, a small mining team to collect raw materials from the asteroid belt, and about 72 hours of uninterrupted work time, plus someone to watch my back in case our saboteur decides to interfere. You'd risk your life for a ship full of strangers? Valdez asked. I'd risk my life to keep 3,000 people from dying or being captured by hostile aliens, Marcus corrected. It's what I do. Lyra was already standing. Chief Valdez, I want you to give Mr. Chen full access to whatever he needs. I'll handle the mining team and security. Your Highness, I'm not sure the captain will approve civilian involvement in critical repairs. Then don't tell him until after we've fixed his ship, Lyra said calmly. Or would you prefer to explain to my father why you let his daughter die in Keth space because of protocol? Valdez winced. Point taken. Mr. Chen, the machine shop is yours. 2 hours later, Marcus stood in the Stellaris' main fabrication facility, surrounded by some of the most advanced manufacturing equipment he'd ever seen. Industrial molecular assemblers that could build components atom by atom. Plasma forges that could work exotic alloys. Quantum scanners that could analyze materials down to the subatomic level. Impressive setup, he murmured, already mentally designing the makeshift components he'd need to build. The ship was designed to be self-sufficient for extended voyages, Lyra explained. She'd changed into practical work clothes and looked ready to get her hands dirty. Though I doubt anyone expected it to be used for emergency hyperspace drive reconstruction. Marcus pulled up the ship's schematics on the main display. The beauty of human engineering is redundancy and adaptability. We build things to be fixed in the field because we know they'll break at the worst possible moments. He traced power conduits with his finger. Look at this. The Stellaris has backup systems for the backup systems. If we can reroute power through the secondary grid, bypass the damaged primary systems, and rebuild the field matrix with simpler but more robust components, we should be able to limp back to civilization. Should? Engineering is about calculated risks. Nothing's ever certain until you test it. Marcus began pulling up fabrication templates on the system. The good news is that human technology is designed to be maintainable by humans. We don't need perfect components, just good enough ones. Over the next hour, Lyra proved to be an excellent assistant. She had a solid understanding of engineering principles and could read technical schematics almost as well as Marcus. More importantly, she understood the urgency of their situation and didn't waste time with unnecessary questions. Power coupling finished, she announced, holding up a component that looked rough but functional. Molecular density is within acceptable tolerances. Marcus nodded approvingly. You've done this before. I spent 6 months on a survey ship in the Outer Rim. The chief engineer there believed royalty should know how to fix what they governed. Lyra activated the next fabrication sequence. He was a crusty old spacer who made me rebuild an entire sensor array from scrap before he'd let me off the ship. Smart man. What happened to him? Promoted to fleet admiral and put in charge of border defense. Lyra's expression darkened. He's probably dealing with Keth incursions right now, wondering why the Stellaris hasn't arrived at Imperial Center as scheduled. Marcus paused in his work. How long before someone notices we're missing? Officially, we're not due to arrive for another 4 days. Unofficially, Imperial intelligence tracks all ships carrying high-profile passengers. When we missed our first scheduled check-in 12 hours ago, someone probably started asking questions. Will they find us? Eventually. But this system is outside normal shipping lanes. And space is vast. It could take weeks. Marcus resumed his work with renewed urgency. Then we'd better fix this ourselves. They worked through the ship's night cycle, fabricating components and testing assemblies. Marcus found himself impressed with Lyra's technical skills and work ethic. She didn't complain about the long hours or the repetitive work, and she caught several errors in his calculations that could have caused serious problems. You know, Marcus said as they calibrated a replacement field harmonizer, you're wasted as a princess. You'd make an excellent engineer. Lyra paused in her work. Thank you. That's the nicest compliment anyone's given me in years. I'm serious. You have good spatial reasoning. You understand complex systems. And you don't give up when things get difficult. Those are the key traits of a good engineer. My tutors always said I was too practical for politics. They meant it as criticism. Politics is about managing people and resources to solve problems, Marcus said. Engineering is about managing energy and materials to solve problems. Not that different, really. Before Lyra could respond, Chief Valdez burst into the fabrication bay. We have a problem. The mining team found something in the asteroid belt. Marcus looked up from his work. What kind of something? Keth ships. 3 of them. Running silent and dark. They've been watching us. The blood drained from Lyra's face. How long? Unknown. Could have been there when we arrived. Could have shown up after we dropped out of hyperspace. Either way, they know we're disabled. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The Keth were known for capturing enemy ships and studying their technology. A disabled Imperial luxury liner would be an irresistible prize. How long until they make their move? Lyra asked. Captain estimates 6 to 8 hours before they work up the courage to approach. Maybe less if they realize who's on board. Marcus looked at the half-completed components scattered around the fabrication bay. I need at least 12 hours to finish the repairs. Then we'd better buy you that time, Lyra said grimly. Chief, does the Stellaris have any defensive capabilities? It's a passenger liner, not a warship. We have basic shields and some mining lasers, but nothing that would stop a serious attack. What about the passengers? Any military personnel on board? Valdez consulted his tablet. A few retired officers. Some Imperial Guard members traveling incognito for your protection. Maybe 20 people with combat experience total. Lyra was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority Marcus had heard when she'd protected his seat assignment. Chief, I want you to quietly alert the security team and any military passengers. Don't cause a general panic, but make sure they're ready. And continue the mining operation. We need those raw materials. What are you planning? Marcus asked. I'm planning to give you 12 hours to save all our lives, Lyra replied. The Keth won't attack a ship that might fight back and damage their prize. But if they think we're helpless... She didn't finish the sentence. Marcus understood. The next few hours would determine whether they escaped as heroes or died as victims. And everything depended on his ability to rebuild a hyperspace drive with spare parts and determination. He turned back to his work with renewed focus. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the ship, alien eyes were watching and waiting. But Marcus Chen had spent his entire life fixing the impossible, and he wasn't about to stop now. The Keth ships moved like predators, stalking wounded prey. Marcus watched them on the sensor display as he made final adjustments to the hyperspace field matrix, their dark hulls barely visible against the star field. They'd been circling the Stellaris for 6 hours, gradually closing the distance while maintaining what they probably thought was a safe scanning range. Field harmonics are stable, Lyra reported from her position at the engineering console. She'd learned the ship's systems faster than most trained engineers, and Marcus found himself relying on her technical judgment more than he'd expected. Power coupling efficiency is at 91%. Good enough. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and stepped back from the jury-rigged hyperspace generator. It looked nothing like the elegant factory-built system it had replaced. Cables snaked between hastily fabricated components. Backup systems had been rerouted through maintenance conduits, and the whole assembly was held together with molecular adhesive and hope. But it would work. It had to work. Chief Valdez appeared at Marcus's shoulder, his face grim. The Keth are moving into attack formation. Whatever you've built, we need to test it now. Marcus nodded. Lyra, initiate the startup sequence. Slowly. I want to see how the field builds. Said. She activated the controls with steady hands despite the tension in her voice. Field generators coming online. Quantum matrix stabilizing. Harmonic resonance is holding steady. Through the bulkhead, Marcus could feel the subtle vibration as the hyperspace drive powered up. The sound was wrong. Rougher than it should be. With harmonic frequencies that made his teeth ache. But the field was building, and that was what mattered. Mr. Chen, The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "How long until we can jump?" Marcus consulted his calculations. 5 minutes for full field stability. Maybe 3, if you're willing to risk a rough transition. The Keth won't give us 5 minutes. They're accelerating toward us. Marcus looked at the sensor display. The alien ships were closing fast, their weapon ports beginning to glow with charging energy. In minutes they'd be close enough to disable the Stellaris with precision fire, capturing the ship and everyone aboard. 2 minutes, Marcus decided. That's the best I can do without risking a catastrophic field collapse. Lyra was monitoring the Keth approach on a secondary screen. "They're signaling us. Standard surrender demand in Broken Imperial." "Ignore it," Valdez ordered. "Keep charging the drive." Marcus watched the field strength indicators climb toward minimum jump threshold. 70%. 75. The Keth ships were close enough now that he could see details of their hulls. Scarred metal plating. Weapon arrays that looked like they'd been salvaged from a dozen different species, and sensor clusters that tracked the Stellaris with predatory focus. 80%, Lyra announced. Field matrix is stable but showing stress fractures in the secondary harmonics. "Will it hold together for a jump?" Valdez asked. Marcus studied the readouts. The fabricated components were already showing signs of strain, and they hadn't even attempted to open a hyperspace tunnel yet. Once they did, the stresses would multiply exponentially. "1 jump," he said finally. "Maybe 2 if we're lucky. After that, we'll need proper repairs." "1 jump to where?" the captain's voice demanded. Marcus had already calculated their options. "The Centauri system. It's only 4 light-years away, and there's an Imperial naval base there. We can reach it even with these improvised systems." 85%, Lyra reported. "Keth ships are entering weapons range." The first energy beams lanced out from the alien vessels, probing shots designed to test the Stellaris' shields rather than cause serious damage. The ship shuddered as the deflector screens absorbed the impact, but Marcus could see the power drain on his displays. "They're trying to disable our shields without damaging the ship," Valdez observed. "They definitely want us intact." 90%, Lyra announced. "Field stability is marginal, but within operational parameters." Marcus made his decision. "Captain, we're jumping now. 90% will have to be enough." "Acknowledged. All passengers, prepare for emergency hyperspace transition. Initiating jump in 10 seconds. The Keith ships realized what was happening and opened fire in earnest. Energy beams and projectile weapons hammered the Stellaris' shields as Marcus activated the final jump sequence. The improvised hyperspace generator screamed in protest. Harmonic frequencies clashing as mismatched components struggled to create the precise field geometries needed for interdimensional travel. "Field collapse in secondary matrix," Lyra shouted over the noise. "Compensating with backup harmonics." Lyra. Compensating with backup harmonics. Marcus's hands flew over the controls, rerouting power and adjusting field parameters in real time. This was engineering at its most fundamental level. Not elegant mathematics and perfect simulations, but raw intuition and desperate improvisation. The universe twisted around them as the hyperspace tunnel opened. Reality became a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and geometries as the Stellaris punched through the barrier between normal space and the higher dimensions where faster-than-light travel was possible. For a moment, Marcus thought they'd made it. Then alarms began screaming throughout the ship. "Field destabilization," Lyra reported. "We're losing cohesion in the primary matrix." Marcus could see it on the displays. The carefully balanced field that kept them stable in hyperspace was fluctuating wildly. One of his fabricated components was failing, sending cascading errors through the entire system. "How long until complete failure?" Valdez demanded. Marcus ran the calculations in his head. 20 minutes. Maybe 30 if I can stabilize the harmonics. How long to reach Centauri? 45 minutes at current velocity. The math was simple and terrifying. They'd drop out of hyperspace short of their destination, probably in empty interstellar space with no hope of rescue. Unless Marcus could find a way to keep the failing systems running twice as long as they were designed to operate. "I need to get to the drive chamber," Marcus said, grabbing his toolkit. Maybe I can reinforce the failing components from inside the field matrix. Valdez grabbed his arm. That's insane. No one can survive inside an active hyperspace field. The radiation alone would kill you in minutes. Marcus shook off the chief's grip. The field chamber has basic shielding. I can survive long enough to make emergency repairs if I work fast. And if you're wrong, you'll die horribly and we'll still lose the drive, Valdez protested. And if I don't try, we'll definitely lose the drive, and everyone on this ship will die when we drop out in empty space. Marcus was already heading for the maintenance shaft that led to the drive chamber. Lyra, monitor the field parameters and warn me if anything changes. Marcus, wait. Lyra caught up with him at the shaft entrance. There has to be another way. There isn't. I've run the numbers a dozen times. Marcus smiled grimly. This is what I do, remember? I fix things when they break. Not by sacrificing yourself. Marcus paused. In the stress of the emergency, he'd almost forgotten who he was talking to. Princess Lyra, fourth in line to the imperial throne, brilliant and capable, and someone whose life mattered to the entire galaxy. She was looking at him like he was about to do something incredibly noble, rather than incredibly stupid. Someone has to, he said simply, and I'm the only one who knows these systems well enough to have a chance. Before Lyra could argue further, Marcus dropped into the maintenance shaft and began crawling toward the drive chamber. Behind him, he could hear her take over his position at the control station, her voice steady as she coordinated with Chief Valdez and the bridge crew. The drive chamber was a sphere, 20 meters in diameter, lined with field generators and quantum processors that hummed with barely contained energy. At the center, a column of twisted spacetime stretched between dimensional anchors, creating the tunnel through hyperspace that carried the ship between stars. Marcus had never seen an active hyperspace field from the inside. It was beautiful and terrifying. Reality bent into shapes that human eyes weren't designed to perceive. Forces that could tear apart atoms dancing in perfect mathematical precision. The radiation detectors on his suit were clicking ominously, but the levels were still within survivable ranges. For now, he located the failing component immediately. One of his fabricated field harmonizers was developing stress fractures that sent ripples of instability through the entire matrix. The part was designed to operate for maybe 6 hours under optimal conditions. It had been running at maximum stress for twice that long. Marcus pulled out his tools and began working. The chamber was filled with electromagnetic interference that made his instruments barely functional. But he'd learned to work by touch and intuition as much as by measurement. 30 years of experience guided his hands as he reinforced failing connections and rerouted power through backup circuits. Marcus, are you all right? Lyra's voice crackled through his communicator, distorted by the hyperspace field. Still alive, he replied, not looking up from his work. How are the field parameters? Stabilizing. Whatever you're doing is working. Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Then he noticed the radiation readings on his suit. They'd doubled in the past 5 minutes. The improvised shielding around the drive chamber was breaking down under the stress of maintaining the hyperspace field. He had maybe 10 minutes before the radiation levels became lethal, 20 minutes to reach Centauri. Marcus made his choice. He disabled the safety interlocks on his fabricated components and began pushing them beyond their design limits. More power, higher field strength. Damn the consequences. If the parts burned out after they reached Centauri, so be it. If they failed catastrophically and destroyed the ship, well, they'd all die anyway if he didn't try. Field strength increasing, Lyra reported. Velocity up by 15%. How long to destination at current speed? Marcus asked. 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Marcus looked at his radiation detectors. The levels were climbing into the red zone. But slowly. He might just survive long enough to see them reach safety. He kept working, making adjustments and repairs as systems failed around him. When a power coupling burned out, he bypassed it with emergency cables. When a field generator overloaded, he rerouted its function through backup units. Every fix was temporary, every solution a desperate improvisation. But it held together. 15 minutes to Centauri, Lyra announced. Marcus, Your radiation exposure is approaching dangerous levels. Can you get back to the main chamber? Marcus looked around the drive chamber. Half his repairs were held together by nothing more than willpower and determination. If he left now, they'd probably fail before reaching their destination. Negative. I need to stay here to keep everything running. Marcus, that's an order from your chief engineer. Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his own authority. Just get us home, Princess. The final minutes stretched like hours. Marcus held failing systems together through pure determination, feeling the radiation slowly cooking him from the inside while reality twisted around him in impossible patterns. His hands were steady despite everything. 30 years of practice had given him that, at least. 5 minutes, Lyra announced. A field generator exploded in a shower of sparks. Marcus rerouted its function through a backup unit that screamed in protest as it tried to handle double its rated load. 3 minutes. A power coupling melted, filling the chamber with toxic smoke. Marcus bypassed it with emergency cables that glowed red-hot with overcurrent. 1 minute. The primary field harmonizer cracked down the middle, sending chaotic resonances through the hyperspace matrix. Marcus grabbed it with his bare hands, using his body as a conductor to complete the circuit and maintain field stability. Dropping out of hyperspace, now, reality snapped back to normal with an almost physical shock. The twisted geometries of hyperspace collapsed into the familiar star field of normal space, and Marcus could see the bright star of Centauri through the chamber's observation port. They'd made it. Marcus released the destroyed harmonizer and collapsed to his knees, his radiation-burned hands shaking uncontrollably. Through his communicator, he could hear celebration from the bridge as sensors detected the Imperial naval base, ships already moving to intercept and assist the damaged liner. Marcus. Lyra's voice was tight with concern. Marcus, respond please. Still here, Marcus managed. Still breathing. And we're home. He heard running footsteps in the corridor outside, then hands pulling him from the chamber. Medical personnel, led by Chief Valdez and Princess Lyra herself. Her face pale with worry, and something that might have been admiration. You magnificent, crazy human, Valdez said as they loaded Marcus onto a medical gurney. You actually did it. Marcus smiled weakly. Told you I fix things when they break. As they wheeled him toward the medical bay, Marcus caught a glimpse of the bridge displays showing the Centauri system. Imperial ships were converging on their position, ready to provide assistance and protection. The passengers were safe. The ship was secure. And somewhere in the chaos of emergency docking procedures, he could hear intelligence officers already planning their investigation into the sabotage that had started this whole adventure. But what Marcus remembered most clearly, as the medical drugs took effect and consciousness faded, was the look in Princess Lyra's eyes. Not the grateful expression of royalty thanking a loyal subject, but something deeper and more personal. The look of one engineer respecting another. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Imperial Naval Hospital, watching ships come and go from the Centauri base while his body finished healing from radiation exposure. The doctors said he'd make a full recovery, though he'd probably glow in the dark for a few more days. I thought I'd find you here. Marcus turned to see Lyra approaching, no longer dressed as a princess but wearing the practical uniform of a ship's engineer. The sight made him smile. Decided to take my advice about career changes? Actually, yes. Lyra joined him at the viewport. I've enrolled in the Imperial Engineering Academy. My father was surprisingly supportive once I explained that the Empire needs leaders who understand how things actually work. And your royal duties? I'll still be a princess. But now, I'll be a princess who can fix a hyperspace drive if necessary. Lyra glanced at him. Speaking of which, I have a proposition for you. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The Imperial Engineering Corps is forming a new rapid response team. Elite engineers who can handle emergency repairs on critical systems anywhere in the galaxy. Dangerous work, but important. Lyra smiled. They need someone to lead the team. Someone with experience keeping impossible things running under terrible conditions. Marcus considered the offer. After 30 years of routine maintenance work, the idea of new challenges and meaningful missions was appealing, especially if he'd be working with engineers who understood that sometimes the best solution was also the most desperate one. What would be my first assignment? Upgrading the infrastructure on frontier stations that have been neglected for too long. Starting with a certain atmospheric recycler on Kepler station that's been making grinding noises for 2 years. Marcus laughed. You remembered. I remember everything from that conversation. It taught me more about leadership than any of my tutors ever did. Lyra grew serious. Marcus, you saved 3,000 lives because you were willing to risk everything for strangers. That's not just good engineering. That's the kind of character the Empire needs in its leaders. I thought you were going to be the leader. I am. But even princesses need good engineers to keep the lights on. Lyra extended her hand. Partners? Marcus shook it firmly. Partners. As they watched the star's wheels slowly pass the viewport, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. A simple booking error had put him in the wrong seat at exactly the right moment, leading to conversations and experiences that changed both their lives. But maybe it hadn't been an error after all. Maybe somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the galactic transportation system, a computer algorithm had made a decision based on data no human would have thought to consider. Maybe it had recognized that sometimes the most important meetings happen between people from different worlds, different backgrounds, different destinies. Or maybe it had just been luck. Either way, Marcus Chen was exactly where he belonged, ready to fix whatever broke next. With a partner who understood that the real magic wasn't in the technology itself, but in the determination of ordinary people to keep extraordinary things running against all odds. In the end, that was the most human thing of all.